Andrea, I am so excited to have you on the podcast.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me. It's so lovely to be here.
I like to start every interview by asking guests, as a kid, what did you want to be when you grew up?
Yeah, so I laugh because of just what teachers told me. So I wanted to be either a professional closet organizer or I wanted to be a female sideline reporter for the Braves, for the Atlanta Braves. And my children have much better teachers than I did. And I don't mean to discredit my teachers, but basically everybody told me those jobs don't exist. And so you need to find something else.
Well, they
So
were
it was,
wrong. They were
yeah,
wrong.
it was really not the easiest thing because I was like, what do you mean? Surely people want their closets to be organized. They're always so messy and you know. And then here's this whole business behind it. And then women were really reporting in sports in the day. So it
Mm,
was kind of factual. But as I was going through college in the millennium, that's when you started to see everybody. And
mm,
I kind of wish I wouldn't have listened. But also, I
mm,
knew that a lot of those women paved a really long road for the rest of everybody else coming after them. So maybe it's for the
100%.
best, you know?
And how do you think that connects to what you do today?
I still love to organize things. It's funny when people ask me, like, what's something fun you did this week? It's like, oh, I got to organize my Google Drive for, finishing this project. And it's the little things, especially when you run a business, you hear a lot about people working on the business versus in the business. And I
Mm,
do find the quiet, deep solitude work of systems and processes
mm,
still the nourishing part of running a
mm,
business. There's something about working in food service or working in retail or working on a factory line where you see the actual physical fruits of your labor
mm.
and there's a satiation that happens at the end of the day. And there's something about that with me. It's not as happy of a feeling if I just print out my calendar and say, well, these are all the networking meetings and sales meetings I had this week. It's not as, invigorating and
Mm.
self-motivating. So I do still like to do a lot of organizing. And I do personally really love sports. I still really love baseball. And thankfully, I have a family that really loves baseball too. And we're diehard Braves fans. So
This
hasn't
still
gone too
works.
far.
And tell us, what do you do today?
Today, I run a company that is the first bubble free, low sugar, non alcoholic cocktail company that was designed to drink well with others. And so the name of my company is called Hapsy, which is the Venn diagram of happy and tipsy. And so we wanted to kind of create something that helps you feel festive at the party or at the third spot, wherever you are with your friends, but isn't as boring as like a club soda with lime or isn't full of other benefits necessarily. You just want a really good, clean cocktail. And maybe you want to
Mm,
drink and maybe you don't. That's up to you. And it's the and, not the or in life.
mm,
And that just stems from my background in consumer product goods, specifically between the two big companies of non alcoholic drinks, Coke and Pepsi, and kind of seeing those start to fall out of the options in the cooler when you're hosting at home. And it's like, well, I still want something, but what do I want that still feels refreshing and festive?
mm-hmm. And tell me, Andrea, how do you think that connects to you wanting to do something that wasn't? Because I'm seeing a connection here of like you wanted to do the closet organizing or the sideline reporter, which were things that were not necessarily a thing yet. And then now you're doing something that's also not necessarily a thing yet.
Yeah, that's an interesting connection you've made. Yeah, I mean, I guess I like to push boundaries. When I go to schools and the career day speaking that
Yep.
you do with kids, which I love to do, I love it so much. It's just so fun. Instead of saying something like, I'm a brand marketing innovation specialist or, whatever, I'm like, I'm a professional puzzle solver because I feel like that is something kids can relate to, but it's
Mm,
also how I feel about my job, no matter what
mm,
it is, actually. I wake up and there's either something I know that's coming down the pike or I'm triaging something that I
mm,
wasn't aware of. But at the end of the day, it is being confronted with problems and saying,
mm,
okay, I'm going to take on this challenge and accept it. And so I think that's always been in me. And I think that's why I've been driven to find white space and find the problems that aren't really reactive, they're the proactive problems and go upstream
mm,
and solve for them.
mm, mm-hmm. Well, tell us, how did you get from wanting to be the closet organizer and the reporter to what you're doing today? Like, walk us through the path. What did you study in college? Tell us about your experience in the beverage industry. What led you there? Tell us all the
Yeah,
things.
sure. So I grew up in Atlanta, Georgia. I'm originally from New Orleans, but I went to high school in Atlanta, Georgia, and I put myself through college. And so filling out the financial aid forms, which were in paper back in the day, you had to like walk them in the hall and turn them in. Also, very true to today, you're declaring a major. And so I knew if I was going to be taking out loans, a lot of it was grants due to my financial situation, but a lot of it was loans. And so I knew if I was going to be taking out loans, I was going to have to find something that I could get an ROI on and pay back these student loans eventually with something. And so I honestly just shot my shot in business. And I was like, I'll just declare business and I'll find
Mm.
something within it that makes sense. And it was as clear as that, honestly. I wish I could say it was more defined, but that first day before college started, I just was like, yeah, this sounds good. For a quick minute, I wanted to dabble in geology. I love the earth, I love rocks. I love the fact that dinosaurs weren't even invented before George Washington founded our country. Like, it's just amazing. It's a basic category, in my opinion. And I was like, oh, there's so much to explore. But I also knew that that would require a lot more education than a BS. And so, could I really make that money back? And it
Mm.
was that financial decision on where I went to business. Luckily, I ended up finding a career I really love, which is in marketing. And so I ended up declaring a major in marketing. And while I was going through college at Georgia State, I was nannying for a while. And one of the families said, listen, we need a receptionist at the front desk at our Atlanta office for Pepsi. Would you want to apply? I said, yeah, I would. Can't afford any of these unpaid internships, but I need on my
Yeah.
resume.
Yep.
It's hilarious now. We're talking like forever ago. I mean, a quarter of a century ago now, but I was like, yeah, I need to show I know how to use a fax machine and like a copier and printer. I'll totally take a leg up on my resume. So I took this position and it afforded me the ability to do all my work sitting at a front desk and just do everything else I needed to do. But luckily, it also afforded me the option to raise my hand on a lot of extra projects that they just didn't.
Mm.
And so a lot of people would just push me stuff up the front. They'd be like, oh, can you handle this? Can you handle that? Whatever. Because it was a sales and marketing office, there were so many things around customer appreciation packages or getting corporate gifts ordered or, whatever. So a lot of other entry level skills I ended up learning that I didn't think I would learn. But
Mm.
that trust that they led in me led to more and more and more work
Mm.
and so before I graduated, I ultimately ended up being in sponsorship marketing for
Mm.
Gatorade.
Mm.
And at 24, I was managing all of the Southeast events for Gatorade, which is a huge company. I mean, it's a huge brand. I mean, the P&L that I got to manage at 24, I can't even fathom another 24-year-old managing that, frankly. But those were the good days. Those were the heydays.
Did you get to go to the Super Bowl?
I did not go to the Super Bowl. I don't think I ever really even cared in the moment. There were so many tickets. I mean, this is how much things used to fly through the office all the time, not just at Pepsi, everywhere. There were so many things that you were just like, same thing with like Daytona 500. You'd be like, nah, I already. It was insane. And it was also so lovely too, because it was just such a fun stage of life when you're single and you're the one that can take the company suite for the Hawks game on a Tuesday night because
No
nobody's in
one
town.
else?
Yeah, sure. Go ahead, Andrea, take it. You want some friends? Here's the suite. I'm like, what is happening? It was insane. And it was such a fun season, but wow, was I spoiled. I did not realize like
How much
that's
those
not
sweets cost?
right. Or just that's not the norm. I went to
Yeah.
another huge company after and I was like, I don't understand why it's not pouring rain and swag and merch and what's going on. I don't get it. And it's just funny. But yeah, so I ended up working there for 5 years and just kind of growing through the company.
Mm.
It was a really amazing time. It was a really amazing time. And then they essentially wanted to move my job to Chicago. And I was like, no, I'm a Southern person through and through. Like, I just can't go. So I ended up taking a leave. And at that point, I was really interested in not doing so much events, but really into the analytical side, back to that like problem solving
Mm.
side. I really did some of that already. We had these Monday meetings where we went through everything. How was your share? How was your growth?
Mm,
How was this promotion that we did at Publix? What was the lift on that?
mm,
Just all
mm-hmm,
these sorts of things. I was like, that's interesting. I wonder what leverage you can pull to make consumers buy more and
mm,
not buy this brand, but buy your brand. And the psychology of marketing started to become like really
mm,
interesting. I was really fortunate to be able to pivot. Nowadays, it's really not easy to do that. But
mm,
at the time, I was fortunate to be able to go and work for a company that's called Nielsen, which is primarily known as the TV ratings company, which I did use a lot just to see what people are watching. What else should I watch? What's going on over here? Or, as I got later and had children, I'd look at it every morning on Mondays to see what was trending over the weekend for just easy meetings with people. You're like, oh yeah, that Red Wedding episode. Yeah, Game of Thrones. Wow. And I had no clue. I had a baby. But I used it to get by and like relational building with clients
Mm,
and stuff. But I didn't know what account I would be put on when I took a position there. And not too surprisingly, since I'm Atlanta and given my tenure, they asked if I would go on the Coca-Cola account. And so I went on happily went on the Coca-Cola account. That's a very easy, natural transition. And I ended up accidentally spending 10 years there. I mean,
wow.
it's amazing. And so what I ended up doing there was very different. It was white space innovation and growth marketing. And so what we would
Mm,
do is we would help Coke find brands and build like an in-house incubation system for
mm,
them. So some of these brands they might want to invest in, some of these brands they might want to just go ahead and acquire. And so we would kind of go and look for things and then kick it over to M&A and they'd see if it's financially feasible, if
oh,
it's plausible,
interesting.
whatever.
Yeah.
And then sometimes they came into the portfolio and then we grew them from there. And so perfect example of that is in 2007, Coca-Cola acquired Glisseau, which is the makers of vitamin water and smart water.
Oh, cool.
Once they brought it in, we helped them create vitamin water zero that was meeting a consumer need that wasn't being met by vitamin. And so just things like that we would do
Mm.
all the time. And then after 15 years, I was just kind of bored in this very amazing but accidental career that I stumbled into just by answering phones one day. And so I was like, I'd really like another challenge. I'd like to do something that isn't as easily known. There's so much marketing fuel and brand awareness. I want to
Mm,
try a bigger challenge, not bigger in brand name, bigger in challenge itself.
mm,
And so they asked me to go ahead and start leading up a team of small and medium businesses. And so that was so fun because at the time it was like Siggy's yogurt. It was so tiny then compared to Dannon. It was working with Chobani to help them create a non-dairy line, which is Chobani
mm,
oat. And so it was
mm,
the same spiel, finding white space and finding ways to expand the consumption within the household or
mm,
reach
mm,
or target in another way. But it was now on just brands that maybe I wasn't even a shopper of.
mm.
And like I had just for men as a client, I couldn't tell you anything about men's hair care. I barely can tell you anything about women's hair care because I get it done at the salon. So for my puzzle brain, it was so fun because I had to go
Mm,
study aisles in a Walgreens, in a Target, in a Walmart and see like what are people seeing when they come?
mm,
What can we do to get them to buy this brand over the other brand? How are they buying it? How can we get them to buy it more often? Things like that. So it
mm,
was such a fun road. And I think ultimately that's what led me to starting my own non-alcoholic cocktail company because between the two, between working for beverages and then between working for small businesses, I got the itch, first of all, but then I
mm.
saw the need and I was like, oh, I think I could do this. So that's where I went.
Well, I want to pause you there and like, okay, so you're at the company working with these school companies that are up and coming or smaller than the bigger ones. And you got the itch, I heard you say, right? But what gave you the courage or what was the moment that kind of you said, okay, I'm going to do it. I'm going to leave this probably financially secure job and go start my own thing. Like,
Yeah.
walk us through kind of that transition period, the leap, or
Yeah.
maybe you wouldn't call it a leap. I don't know. Like, talk us through that.
Yeah. The jump off the cliff. The jump off the cliff. So it was a few things. My husband and I have been together since the same week I started that receptionist job.
Wow.
And yeah, it's crazy. We were set up on a blind date and we were set up on a blind date that same first week. And so it's one of those things where he works in IT. So I've always had more freedom in where I want to go and how I want to move. He works for a smaller company. specifically within Georgia, things like that. And so I've had these amazing chances to reevaluate a couple of seasons of life already
Sure.
and stayed pretty stable and consistent due to just the financially unstable upbringing that I had. And so I wanted to stay as safe as possible. I'd never wanted to get laid off. I just wanted to be the overachiever. The 9 grid, I'm like always in the top right. Just get me high potential, high performer, always kind of striver. And so when it came time for him to buy the company that he's been running, then it was like, well, hang on a second. I actually do have the first time in my life the ability to look and say, what do I want to do? And so my husband has been running this company since 2002. And in 2018, the owner was ready to retire and propositioned, would you like to buy the company? And so we did a 2-year NDA and sale of the business. But during those 2 years, I was then open to just letting things ruminate where I've just been nose grind down all the time kind of thing. If I could do something, what would I do? And I think when you let your mind open up, then things will just naturally come in. And a lot of things came in. I love the name and the impetus of your podcast because I actually went on like a vocational search during that time. And so it wasn't as simple as like, this is exactly what I'm going to do. I know what I'm going to do. I wanted to let my mind just flourish. And because now my husband's going to be transitioning from running a company to be owner operator. And so even though I had an amazing work-life integration and an amazing benefits package, and I mean, I really had an amazing, very happy career, all of a sudden I'd be the one tethered and he wouldn't be. And so I had the ability to say, well, hang on, if I can have even more freedom and have the financial stability to do this, what does that look like? So I actually went on a vocation search and I went to my library. I went to my public library and I said, I want to know what it's like here. I want to know, maybe I want to work here a couple of days a week because I love it here. And I want people to love the library. And so,
I love the library.
I really do. I love the library and I want children to love to read. And nobody read to me growing up, but I certainly want people to not have at 25 starting to learn to love to read. I want them to start their whole life to read. So I went on like that kind of voyage and a few different places. And then I think during that exploration, that's when the brain started going back to just what I know and what I love and my comfort. As crazy as that sounds to start a business, it's comfort. It was just one of those things where I was like, yeah, this would be actually really amazing to do. And there is a need that's not being filled. I know that because I feel it myself and I know a lot of other people. So let's go see what this is like.
Ooh, there's a lot of things I want to dive into there. Well, one, I connect a lot with what you're saying about the financial insecurity growing up. I was first in my family to go to college. I picked accounting because it was stable and I would be able to financially help my family when I got out of college. And so the pivot for me out of that corporate financial role was a tough one. I did it with my husband's support. He had the job. He's in IT too. He was able to support me like going through that. But that was tough because I'd been working since I was 14, never taken a job. And so it was like this like very scary, like, can I do this? I've never wanted to be a business owner. Like this is not what I envisioned for my life, but it was what felt right because I wanted to do this work so badly. And then the second thing that's coming up for me is you said kind of marrying that experience that you had with this thing you saw was a need. Like I think about Steve Jobs' quote that says like looking back, all the dots will connect. You can't connect them going forward. You can only connect them back. And it just like makes sense that like these things that you have in your background and your experience connects to and led you to what you're doing today.
Yeah, I mean, it really does. And it's interesting because when I talk about Hapsy a lot, I talk about how, especially as a woman, I feel like we feel this when we're in a party or we're in a holiday party or a cocktail or a bunko club or mahjong party, whatever it is, right? Your outfit, we're totally comfortable standing out with our outfit or an accessory or things like that. But for some reason, what we're holding in our hand, we don't want standing out. And it's become this kind of social crutch or dependency to blend in that regard, but stand out externally another way. And the dichotomy is just so fascinating to me. Again, I love psychology of consumers, so it's not too surprising. I think the interesting thing to me about it upon reflection is I really wanted somebody to not feel they're left out of a conversation or a party and left out of a situation just because of a choice they make or the choice that they have to make. That's not for me to know or decide, right? And I do think that does stem to my own childhood of being left out a lot for things, choices that made, not on my behalf, but I'm certainly the recipient of those choices, if you will. And so, yeah, I think there is a lot of interesting through lines that connect it ultimately to how the consumer need I'm trying to fill, but also the business background and how the steps all connect at the end.
Yeah, what's coming through is like how empathetic you are too.
Thank you. That's funny because I say I have no emotional love languages at all. In fact, I'm emotionally
That's not true. That's not true. No, the way you just described that, that comes through very strongly.
yeah. Thank you.
And then it makes me think of, when I love hosting, I love having people over and having things at our house. Sometimes we'll have someone who doesn't drink for whatever reason, right? And I've had where I'm like, oh, I don't have anything to offer that's like a drink that's fun, or I didn't think to buy a non-alcoholic beer. And I'm like, I'm beating myself up because as a host, and I try to like be a good host, is I want everyone to have fun and be taken care of and feel like they're being thought of and warm and inviting atmosphere. And so I think part of that
Yeah.
is having a drink that I can
Yeah.
offer, and that from based on your website is not a sugary drink. Because like sometimes we want
Right.
to have a drink and I don't want it full of sugar. So there is a need there.
Yeah. I mean, and it's interesting. It's hard to communicate, especially in the goldfish mentality that we all have now. It's hard to communicate to a consumer how easy something like this is to host. Because on Mother's Day, we had a pool party here and we set out all these cups, like just Hapsy cups, and all these cans of our first cocktail, which is Salty Seagull. So it's a blend of citrus juices and berry juices with sea salt, elderflower, and non-alcoholic bitters. And so it's like a clean, crisp, tart, light drink. And we set out sparkling water and vodka and tequila. And then we set out all these garnishes. We set out tahini, margarita salt, jalapenos. Oh, we had 21 seeds jalapeno infused tequila if you wanted to mix something spicy. We had Liars, which is a non-alcoholic tequila also.
Oh, oh,
It's a burn feel without
oh.
actually
How do you
alcohol.
spell that? That's interesting.
Lyre''S.
Oh, interesting.
And so we had all of these things, and it was basically almost like a Bloody Mary bar, but it was a Hapsy bar instead. And
That's
so
so fun.
we were like, here, and it makes it so easy on the host because you're just setting everything out and you're like, okay, I don't have to batch this huge thing of sangria, which who really likes sangria that much? Like drink 3 or 4 glasses if you want, kind of thing. But also, it made it easy on the host to have non alcoholic and alcoholic options. And the consumer at the party can choose to go between. They can go one on, one off. They can go all off. They can go all on. They can do a half shot. They can do a full shot. It becomes more confusing for the consumer, but really it's all about giving that consumer choice and letting them feel like they're still part of the party at the end of the day.
100%. Well, yeah. And as I'm telling you, we love to host and we have a bar, and to have those, we have our little wine fridge, beverage fridge, to have those. I'm already thinking I'm going to go order a bunch and like have them in the fridge. And then like we're hosting, and then sometimes we'll be fancy and hire a bartender. And it's like,
Mhm.
hey, they can just pop the Hapsy bottle and like
Mhm.
pour it into a nice glass, or like have it as an
Yeah.
option for people, and how nice that would be and how easy.
Yeah. I mean, it's super easy. It's funny because when we did it that way, we told the kids and non-alcoholic drinkers, we were like, if you're going to be non-alcoholic, you can put a garnish on your cup, a lime wedge or something, or an orange wedge. But if you are alcohol, then don't put the garnish on, because we wanted the person who wasn't consuming alcohol to feel lucky. It's always the cocktail that gets the garnish. And like
Mm.
for some reason, the club soda with lime, they put the lime in, not on. Always. Every
That's so
event I
interesting. Yeah. Yeah.
it's always put in there. And I'm like, I want to squeeze it. Don't drop it in. So it's very funny. Like we even like let somebody who wasn't imbibing in that way still feel even not superior, but like just part of the party in another
Yep.
way
Yep.
by letting them
Yep.
have the courage to denote
Yep.
non-alcohol instead. It's all about helping somebody feel included, not giving them another reason to feel excluded.
Again, that empathy coming through.
Yeah, maybe I do have a little bit of a love language.
I think so. What have you learned about yourself through this process? Because I imagine it's not easy, even with all your experience, to start a beverage company.
Yeah, I've learned a lot. I had a really stumbling thing early on. And what I think I've learned more than anything is to listen to people when they tell you something. And it's not that I
Mm,
wasn't listening before, but the things I have to listen to now feel a lot more personal because it's my business. It's not just a client. And so, just as an example, I was on the phone with somebody very early on, and I had called them, and it's their expertise. And we're talking to like a flavor scientist. Okay. And this is above my pay grade. This is why this person's on the phone with me. But we're sitting there on the phone, and this person's like, well, when you get to the oxidation level of blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, yeah, 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 yeah. I'm like frantically writing notes down to try and Google what this all means after. And I got off the phone and I just took to the bed for 3 hours because I was like, I'm going to fail miserably. I am trying to do this. This is so silly. And later that afternoon, I told my husband, I said, listen, I had a terrible day. I really don't want to talk about it because nobody likes to talk about it. They don't know something, right? And so I was like, I really don't want to talk about it. But I'm just, if you hear me edgy, it has nothing to do with you. Just, I have an ego hit, And then later after dinner, he was like, do you want to tell me? I was like, I will tell you. You just can't say a single word. Like, I want nothing because I didn't want to hear it because I was hit. And I told him, and he said, all right, can I just say one thing? I said, you can say one thing. And for what, 15 years, Andrea, people have called you and paid you a pretty penny with their problems, expecting you to know how to solve them. And he was like, you're on the same call. You're just on the other end of the line. Let them solve your problems. And it really helped me open my eyes to say, like, okay, first of all, this isn't an ego hit. I'm doing the right thing by finding the right people to do things for me, right? That I don't know how to do and I don't need to know how to do. I'm delegating and right sourcing the way I should. But it also allowed me to let them just tell me what they know and let me learn instead of just trying to be like, well, I know I need you, just do it and let's leave it at that. It really helped me just open up the whole process to learning and really get in there and just say, okay, I don't know what I'm doing. Can you help me, please? I think that's probably the most number one thing, or however I want to say it, thing that I learned because it helped me learn so many things after that moment.
It was like this
He
light
loves
bulb
this
moment.
story.
Oh, he makes sure everyone knows.
He is my better half. So yeah.
Oh, well, and what do you see next for Hapsy? So I know you're online, like tell us all the things.
Sure. So we just launched with our first cocktail last summer, at the end of last summer. And so right now we're going through the supply chain, the retail supply chain within Atlanta. And then we're going to start to target Charleston and Nashville and probably Birmingham. So why Atlanta? Obviously, we have a lot of connections here. But also, there is a recent poll that shows the number one city within like Google Trends, basically, that's interested in sober curious is Atlanta.
Oh,
So,
that's so interesting.
yes. And Birmingham is also in the top five, which is
Oh,
another reason it's
interesting.
market we're going to talk to. So it's interesting. There is a lot down here that people are quietly or maybe not so quietly, looking into and trying to find the and option. Because sober curious. It's just, hey, I'm going to have two cocktails at brunch and then I'm going to go out later tonight, but I kind of just need something in between. Want something in between. I'm having friends over before we go to dinner, but I don't really want to have another drink. Or it's the end of the night. I don't want to have another drink, but I do want to have another drink because I want to stay a little longer. There's plenty of occasions for it. So that's kind of the targeted approach we're taking there. We're also working on additional flavor profiles. So everything we do, we want to make for drinking well with others, is what we say. And so we are looking at other ways to have maybe a fuller bodied drink, this crisp, tart, light occasion. What does one paired with a rum or a bourbon taste like? That kind of fuller, richer mouthfeel and the thicker viscosity that we expect with those kind of cocktails. And so those are some of the things that we're kind of working on in the pipeline behind the scenes.
That's so fun. And are you still having fun with it?
A lot of fun with it. Yeah. It's funny because I just said last week to somebody, they said, how do you even sum up what you do with everything between all the things you do? And I said, oh, I keep thinking of that Game of Thrones line. I drink and I know things. And it's not to say that I'm a know-it-all, but it's like I also mentor people and I public speak and I do all these other things on the side. And it's just so funny, but it is a lot of fun. It is a lot of fun being in beverage. Beverage is so fragmented now from when I started. It really was just Coke and Pepsi and the blue and the red trucks on the street. But this category has gotten so fragmented and not every startups end goal is to be bought by the red truck or the blue truck anymore. And so it's a really fun time to be in beverages
Mm,
again after 25 years of starting here. It's a really different category altogether now. So
mm,
it's a lot of
mm. Andrea, what would you say to someone who's listening who's thinking, what if I did my own vocation search, or kind of feeling that feeling or nudge or itch that you were feeling at some point? What would you say to that person listening?
I would definitely say listen to it. Financially, if you can afford to do something, do it for sure. Somebody that was a client of mine, I won't name the account, but somebody that was a client of mine called me soon after I left Nielsen to start this. And he didn't realize that I had, he was like, why is your email not working anymore? What's going on? And I was like, oh, this is what's going on. I've left. I'm going to try and find my own thing. And he said for 22 years, every year, the same month, every year, when I thought about leaving but didn't, I reflect on how I didn't. And I still have remorse every single year.
Mm,
He was like, you will never have this feeling. Go and do it. You will know, fail miserably or not, you will finally know the answer to the question that I will never be able to answer for myself. So I think I'll just share that back. If you have that itch, go source it out and get the answer. Whether the answer is a terrible failure in your mind, that's your framing of it. You still learned a lot. You still had an experience and a journey. The end result is really how you prefer to measure that end result. And if you want to measure it as a failure, you can, but really there's probably a lot of amazing stuff within that, even if you do technically not exit this huge app that you wrote or, whatever it ends up being.
yeah.
There's some form of success that lies within. You can choose to see it that way at the end.
That's beautiful. Thank you for being here today. Where can people follow? Where can people buy Hapsy?
Yeah, so we are online at behapsy.com, behapsy.com. You can order us online right now. You can order us on Amazon very soon.
Ah,
And
congrats.
thank you.
That's huge.
It is huge. It's a longer project than I expected it to be, but it's very cool. And then we are also on a couple of other things like Fair and Air Goods and things like that. If you are a wholesale business, those are probably more, familiar for the wholesale people. And then we are getting into some restaurants and bottle shops here in Atlanta, which,
If
if
you're
you're in
local
Atlanta,
to Atlanta.
yeah, if you're local to Atlanta, you can hit us up online and we'll tell you.
Awesome. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you so much for having me. I wish you the best.